how do you square that?
All of these people have value. I want to say that because it's really important. But I also find it incredibly problematic that we have whole industries in this country that literally rely not on immigrant labor, but on illegal immigrant labor. We have to ask ourselves why that is. And I have a problem with these workers being exploited. They have no recourse. They know they can't go to the authorities if they're being mistreated at work. They know that they can get paid even lower than minimum wage with absolutely no recourse. That's a huge problem. And I think the heart of this issue...
The Trump administration paused immigration raids at farms and restaurants, then reversed that pause within days. A meatpacking plant in Omaha dropped to 20% capacity overnight. And the same administration that built its identity on immigration enforcement suddenly discovered that the economy it promised to fix runs on the labor it is trying to eliminate. The economic contradictions collapsed in real time on this panel, and Tiffany Cross named the racial architecture underneath all of it. Let's get into it.
Causing immigration raids at farms, hotels, and restaurants. But just a few days ago, the president struck a completely different tone, essentially admitting that his deportation crackdown is hurting critical industries of the U.S. economy and its undocumented workers, and instead promising, quote, changes are coming. So it's hard to keep track because actually, Anna, you were here, yesterday or the day before, and we were talking about this. And then literally within the hour, Trump changed his mind, maybe because I guess the hypocrisy of it all was pointed out that you can't just immunize the industries that you care about because he's a hotelier and then penalize everybody else for the same thing.
I have a hard time thinking that hypocrisy would be a reason for Donald Trump to change his mind on anything. It's never stopped him before. I do think it's about the numbers. If they have a quota to reach of 3,000 people deported, detained a day, there's no way they can do it if they don't go to places where there are industries where there are a lot of undocumented immigrants, and that is the agriculture industry, that is the hospitality industry. Let's remember that when Donald Trump was running in 2016, there were undocumented immigrants that came forth that had been working in his own hotel and hospitality properties. And look, what's going to happen here is that we're going to find that milk gets a lot higher, because I don't know if any of you have ever been in a dairy farm. It is god-awful work. We're going to see that groceries and vegetables are higher. We're going to see an effect in our economy because whether people like it or not, whether Americans acknowledge it or not, undocumented immigrants are an integral part of our society and our economy. And we're going to have to get used to seeing the videos of U.S. citizens detained, of U.S. citizen children being ripped from the arms of their mothers and while they wail, of, you know, dads and moms and business owners. Yeah, we're going to have to get used to that.
Well, what she was just saying, I mean, we've seen this play out. There was a raid in Omaha, Nebraska at a meatpacking plant. Today, Hartman, the company's president, said 30% of his workers came to work the next day after that raid. The rest had either been detained or were too scared to return. The plant, which processes beef, pork, chicken for restaurant chains and grocery stores, now operating at 20% of capacity. So there's the impact she was talking about.
Yeah, we're seeing conservatives in Pennsylvania, like Representative Glenn Thompson, coming out and saying, look, we got to protect our farms. And there's a reason for that, right? You're not running a farm without undocumented immigrants. It's just not able to happen. In states like Pennsylvania, it's going to tremendously damage our farm industry there and other states that rely upon farming. It's the single largest industry in a state like Pennsylvania that was oh so important to President Trump to win the election. I think he saw that. He saw the farms who've been tremendously supportive of him. Brooke Rollins did a good job advocating on behalf of the agriculture community. You have restaurants and taverns, which he has an affinity for, has an understanding of, so he lumps those together. But it was really about Brooke Rollins advocating on behalf of the agriculture industry. And there's a fight internally on that in the White House.
I guess I'm really trying to understand, why is it okay to say these undocumented immigrants have value and all the other ones who maybe they don't work on a farm, but maybe they take care of someone's child, don't have value, even though similarly they don't have criminal records. They've not.
You're hearing people come out and say,
I guess that's what I'm asking. Like, how do you square that?
All of these people have value. I want to say that because it's really important. But I also find it incredibly problematic that we have whole industries in this country that literally rely not on immigrant labor, but on illegal immigrant labor. We have to ask ourselves why that is. And I have a problem with these workers being exploited. They have no recourse. They know they can't go to the authorities if they're being mistreated at work. They know that they can get paid even lower than minimum wage with absolutely no recourse. That's a huge problem. And I think the heart of this issue right now, even though, Donald Trump does cruel things, I'll acknowledge that. But the heart of this problem, what led to this situation, is the fact that Congress doesn't do anything. They don't legislate for decades. They don't legislate. They don't pass the desperately needed immigration reforms that we need. I want people to be protected, but I also don't want entire industries to basically increase their profitability by exploiting labor in this country, and that's what's been going on for a long time.
Let's start with the whiplash, because the speed of the reversal tells you everything. The administration paused workplace raids, then reversed that pause within hours of the hypocrisy being publicly noted. Specifically, that the president is a hotelier who personally benefited from undocumented labor in his own properties. The pause ended. The raids resumed. Anna Navarro identified the operational reality underneath the flip-flopping. The administration has a quota of 3,000 detentions per day. You cannot meet that number without targeting industries where undocumented labor is concentrated: agriculture, hospitality, food processing. These sectors built their entire business model around workers who have no legal recourse, cannot report wage theft, cannot demand minimum wage without risking deportation. The industries knew this and built their profit margins on it. Now the policy satisfying the base is destroying the supply chains feeding the base. A meatpacking plant in Omaha ran at 20% capacity the day after a raid. Milk and grocery prices are already rising. This is not theoretical. It is happening.
You said Congress hasn't done anything. They haven't normalized immigration laws and modernized them. And as a result, you have this whole underclass of workers in this country who then get penalized while the employers don't.
Right. Look, we do have an immigration problem, but I think immigration has to uniquely be tied to deficits in our country. So if there are industries and sectors that require additional workers where Americans, we don't have enough people, for example, then you have to pull people obviously from other places. And it's clear to me that the president is recognizing that as it pertains to agriculture and the service industry.
They undid, they're going back to the raids.
It's an action by Congress as to why he starts thinking about it this way. He has to almost legislate from the executive branch on this because no one's doing anything about it. He had to close the border.
But he could also lead. He could also lead and say, "Hey, Congress, that my party controls in the House and the Senate, put a bill together. Put something on the table."
He has a party full of loyalists. Any one of these people would have.
I don't think he would get a bill passed.
I don't think it's even an effort to do that. But I just want to remind the viewers, his wife herself, a former nude model, got the Einstein visa to come over here, completely usurped the immigration system. What was her unique talent, I wonder, that she was able to get that? Furthermore,
the exploitation problem is structural, not accidental. Entire American industries built their profitability on workers who cannot seek legal protection, while the employers who hired and profited from them face no consequences. That exists because Congress has refused to modernize immigration law for decades. Singleton offered the most pragmatic argument on the panel: tie immigration status to labor sector deficits, create a path to citizenship for workers in essential industries, stop forcing people to live in permanent fear. It is not radical. It is roughly what George W. Bush attempted with McCain and Kennedy. Bush had nowhere near Trump's hold on his party. If Trump wanted to solve this, he could. He does not. Because resolving it removes the most reliable political weapon in his arsenal. Then Tiffany Cross named what sits underneath all of it. This immigration policy is the brainchild of Stephen Miller, whose white nationalist views are extensively documented going back to his high school years. The architecture reveals the logic. Travel bans targeting black and brown countries. Rapid processing for white Afrikaner families under a genocide claim no international body has substantiated. U.S. citizens detained because they look brown or speak with an accent. Melania Trump receiving an Einstein visa reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability, while working-class people from El Salvador and Honduras face the full weight of enforcement. Cross asked the question the administration cannot answer. What extraordinary talent qualified her for that visa while the people picking fruit and processing meat get raided? The wealth gap underneath this conversation is not incidental. The average white household holds more than 6 times the wealth of the average black household. Black women are the most educated demographic group in the country and among the least paid. The political movement controlling every branch of federal government is using that power not to close those gaps, but to enforce them, targeting the communities with the least wealth, the least legal protection, and the fewest resources to fight back.
These deportations because he's trying to be competitive with his predecessor, who I'm ashamed to say, Obama, who they called deporter-in-chief because he deported so many people. 430-something thousand, I believe, was the height of the year 2013. And can I just say really quickly, though, Stephen Miller, this entire immigration policy is the brainchild of Stephen Miller, a white nationalist, according to all the reporting, very documented reporting. He's a white nationalist, exactly. And that is the problem here. Ever since he was in high school, he is actually regurgitating people that were actually...
I just want to say one thing here, Anna.
I remember when George W. Bush worked with John McCain and Ted Kennedy to craft. He led in crafting an immigration bill that got very close to passing and didn't. And George W. Bush had nowhere near the loyalty from Republicans that Donald Trump has from his party. So if he wanted to actually come up with a solution, he would. But listen, let's also remember that at the same time that he's kicking out all of these brown people are getting detained just because they're brown. Even U.S. citizen brown people, just because they speak with an accent like I do. At the same time that he's opening the doors for Afrikaners fleeing from a non-existent genocide, white Afrikaners fleeing from a... So, you know, at the same time that he is banning travel from black and brown countries...
It has also been, I mean, what she's saying...
This is about the brown...
Listen, it is also true that this is a very potent political issue for Trump. And if he were to resolve it, as he has at the border, he's resolved the border, which has created other problems for himself because he can't use the border as much as he used to. If he were to resolve it, it would take the political issue off the table, and it doesn't seem like they are interested in doing that.
I don't agree with Anna that the president could convince Congress to pass a legislation where you would get enough Republicans in the House to actually agree with it. I do not agree with that at all. I don't agree.
That's quite a statement about Trump's political power, guys.
News host as Department of Defense
If that is
chief.
true, we got to go. If that is true, that is quite a statement about Trump's political power or lack thereof. Shermichael, everyone else, thank you very much.
The pause and reversal of workplace raid guidance was not a policy correction. It was a political calculation exposed and then retreated from. The economic pain being caused by this enforcement approach is real, documented, and already showing up in grocery prices and production capacity. The workers being targeted built industries that American consumers depend on. The employers who hired them and profeased from their vulnerability face no consequences. And the man whose own properties relied on undocumented labor is now running the administration, ordering the raids. Tiffany Cross said what needed to be said. The racial pattern in this policy is not a side effect. It is the design. Who gets expedited? Who gets detained? Who gets the Einstein visa and who gets the deportation flight? Those choices are consistent. They have been consistent. And when the person designing the immigration architecture has a documented history of white nationalist ideology going back decades, the pattern is not mysterious. It is the policy. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think a bipartisan path to citizenship for workers in essential industries is politically achievable, or has that window closed? And do you believe the economic damage from these raids will eventually force a policy correction, or will the administration absorb it? I want to hear where you stand. Subscribe to the Debate Recliner. We will keep following every reversal and every consequence.